The Shadow in the Woods and Other Scary Stories. Written by Max Brallier. Illustrated by Letizia Rubenginski. Dear reader, I like scary stories with strange shadows and spooky sounds, just like the stories in this book. An odd box was left on my doorstep last night. A rusty padlock for a school locker sat beside it. Here's what I found inside. An owl feather, a flashlight battery, fingernail clippings, a tuft of red hair. There was also a notebook inside the box. This note was taped to it. Promise me, Mr. Shivers, that you will share the stories inside this book. Long ago, I learned to keep my promises. So here I share those strange and scary stories, but be warned, they might make you shiver. Signed, Mr. Shivers. The Shadow in the Woods. Hugh hates walking through the woods in the dark, but it's the only way home from school. Older kids say a monster lives in the woods. The monster is big with fangs, the kids say. The monster calls out your name, the kids say. When you hear your name, run, the kids say. Hugh usually walks home with a friend, but today Hugh stayed late at school, so he is alone. Hugh walks quickly. Sticks snap, leaves crunch. Hugh hears these noises every time he walks home. Then Hugh hears a new noise. Hugh! Hugh knows it is an owl hooting, but Hugh feels like someone is following him. He looks behind him. Nobody is there. The moon is full. It's so bright that it casts long shadows. Hoo! Hugh hears the owl again. Hugh still has the feeling he is being followed. He stops and listens. Quiet. Only hoo! Hugh is almost to the clearing. He can see the old barn ahead. Hugh's shadow is long. He remembers the monster is big with fangs. Ooh! He remembers. The monster calls out your name. Hugh walks faster. He says, I'm not a scaredy cat. Ooh! As Hugh passes the old barn, his shadow rises from the ground. He sees it on the barn wall. Hugh stops, but his shadow keeps moving. The shadow turns towards him. Its huge mouth opens. The mouth is full of fangs. Suddenly Hugh understands this is not his shadow. There is no owl hooting. Ooh! It is the monster in the woods calling his name. Hugh! He remembers the warning. When you hear your name, run! Finally, Hugh starts to run, but it is too late. The monster in my room. Ruby was sure a monster lived under her bed. She could smell the monster. It stank like the inside of a wet garbage can. Sometimes she could even hear it growl. Ruby's older brother crawled under the bed. "There's no monster here," he told her. But Ruby was sure a monster lived under the bed. Ruby's dad pushed boxes under her bed. "Now there's nowhere for a monster to hide," he told her. But Ruby was still sure a monster lived under her bed. "The monster only comes out in the dark," Ruby told her family. "That's why you can't see it." But no one believed her. Ruby's brother gave her a flashlight. "Use this when you feel scared," he told her. That night, Ruby climbed into bed. Suddenly, she heard a noise. "Oh no." Ruby turned on the flashlight. She saw a shadow on the floor. It came from under the bed. Ruby wanted to call out for help, but she was too scared to open her mouth. She dropped the flashlight. Thump! It fell to the floor. That's when she saw the hand. A large, hairy, purple hand. 8 long fingers were wrapped around the flashlight. Ruby could not move. The hand came towards her, closer and closer. Then, "Hey, kid," the monster said, "you dropped this." Fingernails. "Stop that!" Tommy's grandmother told him. Tommy dropped his fingers from his mouth. "Please stop chewing your fingernails," his grandmother begged him. Tommy looked at his left hand. The nail of his pinky finger was a little crooked. His thumbnail was jagged. "Your fingernails are so dirty. Look at how perfect mine are," Tommy's grandmother said. She frowned. "Promise me that you will never chew your fingernails again." Tommy looked at his grandmother's nicely shaped nails. They were boring, too clean, too neat. She liked his own short, jagged nails much better. Tommy nodded. "I promise I will never chew my fingernails again," he said. "Good," his grandmother smiled. She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. She fell asleep. A bit later, she felt something strange. It felt warm and wet, gummy. She also heard a strange sound. It was a tiny crunching sound. Tommy's grandmother opened her eyes. Bits of fingernail littered across her lap. Tommy stared up at her as he chewed and chewed and chewed. The writing on the wall. Sophie's mother parked the car. "Welcome to your new home, Sophie." The house looked even worse than Sophie had imagined. Its roof drooped. A loose shutter slapped in the wind. "I don't want to live in this old house," said Sophie. "You're going to love it," her mother smiled. Sophie walked inside. The floors creaked. "It's creepy in here. I feel like I'm being watched," she said. "I want to go home." "This is home," her mother said. Sophie climbed the dusty stairs. The steps moaned. She pushed on the door to her new bedroom. The door did not move. "This house doesn't want me here," Sophie thought. She pushed harder. Suddenly, the door opened. The room was cold. She opened the curtains. Beetles escaped. The window was cracked. A chill ran through Sophie. She hoped it was only the wind coming through the glass. "I don't want to live in this house," she said. Slam! The door closed behind her. Sophie spun around. Somebody was there. But it was only an old mirror. "I don't like it here," she said through clenched teeth. It was getting dark. Sophie's bed would come tomorrow, so she unrolled her sleeping bag. The floor was hard. There was dirt everywhere. "I don't want to sleep in this house," Sophie said. Her mother called upstairs. Her voice was cheerful. "Good night, sweet dreams," she said. Sophie ripped open her backpack and grabbed her red marker. She wrote on the wall, "I don't want to live in this house." When Sophie woke the morning, the red marker was gone. Instead, a black marker lay on the floor. Written on the wall were these words, "I don't want you here either." The animal behind the locker. Emma set her books on the floor in front of her locker. School was over. Then she heard a noise. Scratch, scratch. She looked in the locker. Scratch, scratch. She reached in to grab her backpack. "I think there's an animal behind my locker," Emma said. Scratch, scratch. Emma heard the noise again. The janitor came by. "Some poor animal is trapped behind my locker," Emma told him. He listened carefully. "I don't hear anything," the janitor said. Soon, the hall was empty. Emma shut her locker and turned to walk away. Just then, click! The lights went out. "I know there's an animal trapped behind my locker," Emma said. "I need to set it free." She took a deep breath and opened her locker. She squeezed all the way inside. The locker's back was loose. She pushed and pop! Emma was now behind the locker. Then clang! The locker's back snapped into place. Emma was trapped. It was dark. Just a bit of light snuck in. Scratch, scratch. But this time, it wasn't a noise. Something rough was scratching her cheek. Emma blinked. It was hard to see. Scratch, scratch. This time the scratches hurt. Then Emma saw it. A huge spider was hanging beside her. It had long, hairy legs. The spider smiled at Emma. Sharp, wet fangs stuck out. Emma tried to move, but she was caught in the spider's sticky web. Her feet were glued to the gooey ground. She reached for the cold metal locker. Scratch, scratch. This time, Emma was the one scratching. Emma was the animal trapped behind the locker. Thank you guys for following along, reading with me. Hope you enjoyed it.